Welcome back for the third part of our three-part series on the Israeli M-50 Sherman tank. While the previous episodes have covered the design, production and operational use of the vehicle, we will now cover the upgrades proposed after it exited service with the IDF, its camouflage and markings, and some myths that need to be dispelled. A document of the Spanish Ejército de Tierra, dating from November 1982, proposed to the country's high command the modernization of some of the vehicles in service, and examined some of modernizations being carried out in other nations. Among the many proposals to upgrade Leopard 1s and M48 patterns, an interesting proposal of the Israeli Nimda company is mentioned. The Israeli company was planning to upgrade the M50 and perhaps also the M51 Sherman with the installation of a new power pack consisting of the Detroit diesel V8 Model 71T engine connected to a transmission system with mechanical clutch or to an Allison TC570 torque converter with a modified gearbox. After conversion, the tank would have a top speed of 40 km per hour and a range increase of 320 km. The new drive system would also include dust filters and an improved cooling system that could be housed in the existing engine compartment without any structural changes. In addition, the company proposed the adaptation of the old CN 7550 75mm cannon, reboring it from 75mm to 90mm caliber, making it similar to the French-made CN 90F3 90mm L53 cannon, the same one mounted on the AMX 1390. The gun could fire rounds at a muzzle velocity of 900 meters per second and could fire the same rounds as the GIAT D921 cannon of the Panhard AML armored car, HE, and Heat FS. It could also fire an APFS DS round designed for another French 90mm cannon. This project was most likely proposed to Chile in 1983, but they opted for the IMI 60mm hypervelocity medium support cannon, which was more effective in anti-tank combat. In the early 80s, Chile asked the Israeli military industry for an upgrade package for the M-50 Sherman. A prototype armed with the new HVMS-60 was built on an M-50 hull and, after positive evaluations during training in 1983, it was presented to the Chilean High Command, which accepted the upgrade for their 65 M-50 Shermans. From early 1983, this vehicle was used by Chile, which only replaced them in 2006. At the birth of the 1st Armored Corps in 1948, the IDF used the olive drab paint on its first Shermans, left by the British in military warehouses or purchased together with the first vehicles in Europe. Until the first half of the 50s, olive drab was sometimes used in more brownish shades on all Israeli Shermans, including the very first M50 Mark Is. Already in the early 50s, however, the Sinai grey was tested on some M3 Shermans, accepted in service shortly before the Suez Crisis, even if, at least until 1959, the M50s coming out of the conversion workshops were still painted in olive drab. By the early 60s, all the M50s were painted in the new Sinai grey which, however, as can be seen in many color photos of the time, had many shades, painted even to the discernment of local commanders. The armored brigades stationed in the Golan Heights and on the borders with Jordan, Syria and Lebanon had a darker or brownish color, while the vehicles used in the south, on the border with Egypt, had a more yellowish shade for use in the Sinai. Obviously, over the years, these vehicles were mixed in with the various Israeli armored units and were repainted with other shades. The Israeli marking system entered service after 1960 and it is still used today by the IDF, even if the meanings of some symbols are unknown or unclear to us. The white stripes on the cannon barrel identify which battalion the tank belongs to. If the tank belonged to the 1st Battalion, it only had one stripe on the barrel. If it is the 2nd Battalion, it had 2 stripes, and so on. The company the tank belongs to is determined by a white chevron, a white V-shaped symbol painted on the sides of the vehicle, sometimes with a black outline. If the M50 belonged to the first company, the chevron was pointing downwards. If the tank belonged to the second company, the V was pointing forward. If the chevron was pointed upwards, the vehicle belonged to the third company, and if it pointed backwards, it belonged to the fourth company. The company identification markings have different sizes according to the space a tank has on its sides. The M48 Patton had these symbols painted on the turret and were quite big, while the Centurion had them painted on the side skirts. The Shermans had little space on the sides and, therefore, the company identification markings were painted on the side boxes, or in some cases, on the sides of the gun mantlet. The platoon identification markings are written on the turrets and are divided into a number from 1 to 4 and one of the first 4 letters of the Hebrew alphabet, Aleph, Bet, Gimel, or Dalet. The Arabic number from 1 to 4 indicates the platoon to which the tank belongs, and the letter, the tank number inside each platoon. Tank number 1 of the first platoon would have painted on the turret the symbol 1 Aleph. Tank number 2 of the third platoon would have painted on the turret 3 Bet, and so on. The platoon's command tank only has the number without the letter, or, in rare cases, the platoon commander has Aleph, as in the first tank of the platoon. In pictures of the M50s, these symbols are not always visible, as pictures taken during the Yom Kippur War in 1973 show many M50s which had already been withdrawn from operational service, repainted and kept in reserve. On some photos taken before the standardization of the system of markings, 3 white arrows can be seen on the sides of the vehicle in service in the Sinai, the markings of the Israeli Southern Command. Others also had a number painted on the front that identified the weight of the vehicle. This was done to indicate if the tank was able to cross certain bridges or for transportation of trailers. The number was painted white inside a blue circle surrounded by another red ring. All 75 vehicles that were given to the Lebanese militias were repainted in white before delivery. A small number of the 35 Shermans delivered to the South Lebanese Army were repainted with a blue-grey camouflage with black stripes. Some received a light blue camouflage, while others kept the white color with which they arrived from Israel in 1975. The M-50 Shermans of the SLA had the symbol of the South Lebanon Army, a hand holding a sword from which cedar tree branches, the symbol of Lebanon, came out in a blue circle, painted on the frontal glacis. The M50 Mark IIs delivered to Chile in 1983 had another type of camouflage. The 85 M51s Chile first received in 1979 arrived with Sinai grey camouflage. The Ejército de Chile greatly appreciated the camouflage because, in the Atacama Desert where Chilean crews were training, it was very useful. After a short time, however, they decided to switch to other paints, because the dust and salt were affecting the Israeli paint. The Atacama Desert is the driest place on Earth because of the very high salt content. No single camouflage scheme was decided for the whole army, and it was the local commanders who chose the scheme and bought the paints. The M50s which arrived in Chile in 1983 were also in the classic Sinai grey camouflage, but were repainted immediately after being assigned to their units. Many of the camouflage patterns remain a mystery, but a lot of information is available about the ones used by the Grupo Blindado No. 9 Vencedores of the Brigada Acorazzato No. 1 Coraceros, used in the north of Chile. This unit repainted some of its M50s in a light sand yellow color, and others in green-gray, similar to the olive drab. In the end, in 1991, all the Shermans of the armored group were repainted in light sand yellow, because the grey-green was covered by desert sand. The Israeli army had practically every version of the Sherman in service. The common practice was to call them based on the name of their main armament. M3 Sherman designated vehicles armed with a 75mm M3 cannon. M4 Shermans were the vehicles armed with the 105mm M4 cannon, and M1 Shermans for those armed with the 76mm M1, M1A1, and M1A2 cannons. Consequently, the Shermans modified with the French CN 7550 cannon took the name of M-50 Sherman. The nickname Super was actually used only for Sherman versions armed with 76mm cannons. These, which also had a dozer blade, remained in very limited use through the Yom Kippur War before being removed from service entirely. These vehicles were the only ones to receive this nickname from the IDF. These M1 Shermans were supplied in the 1950s by the French. The I Sherman nickname is also often encountered, but it was never used by the Israeli army to indicate any vehicle of the Sherman chassis. It probably originated from model kit producers or ill-informed writers and journalists. Chilean vehicles armed with a 60mm cannon were never called, neither by the Chilean army nor by the Israeli army, M60 Shermans. The only known name for this variant is M50 Sherman with HVMS 60. The M50 Sherman appeared as a vehicle of necessity for the Israeli army. It was meant to make the standard M4 Shermans, armed with the obsolete Second World War 75mm M3 cannon, effective enough to still be viable on the battlefield, by upgunning them with more modern cannons and changing the engines. In this period, the Arab armies were heavily rearming after the 1948 defeat, and the IDF needed to have tanks capable of dealing with these more modern threats. The M50 Shermans proved themselves when fighting against similar vehicles of World War II vintage, taking part in some of the crucial events that led to the continued existence of the Israeli nation. While they managed to also deal with later vehicles, such as the T-54 in some situations, by the late 60s and 1973, the M50 was clearly obsolete. Thank you for watching this Tank Encyclopedia voiced article. Make sure to follow our website. We'll be releasing new articles on the regular. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or Reddit. If you use Discord, there's a link to our community server in the description. And if you would like to help us continue to develop and expand, consider donating on Patreon or PayPal. All of the funds will be used to help us enhance and design new articles and features for you. Until next time, keep us in your sights.